Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today, we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. It's always a pleasure to have Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein with us. He's the Rav and founder of Machon Maggid Harakia in Cedarhurst, New York. He's a contemporary writer, speaker. He has over 5,000 recorded Shiurim, and he has a fascinating series of books on different holidays, and including his one that came out last year called The Darkness and the Dawn, Bein HaMitzarim, Tisha BAv, the Four Fasts, the Holocaust Memorial, the Anguish of the Gullus, and the Glory of the Jewish Eternity. Rabbi Glatstein, welcome back. Good to have you back on the program.
Good evening, Zev. How are you?
Good, thank God. Thank you for joining us. So I enjoyed your sefer on Tisha BAv, and I found some very unique thoughts in there. So I'd like to start off with something which deals with the melody of Eicha. We go, Eicha, na, 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 na. You said there's a correlation between the Eicha melody and Simchas Torah.
Yeah,
I'd like you to reflect on that.
Yeah, it's really a revolutionary discovery, I think. You know, the Eicha nega, Eicha haya shavadad, hayir abasiyam haisa gaman. But the Simchas Torah nigan is almost identical. Kimitzi hayin teitzei saira, ba'avur David avdecha, right? Hashivenu Hashem, vayivin saira vayomer Moshe. But there's only one. There's one difference. The difference is Kimitzi hayin teitzei saira, udvar Hashem meirushalayim.
It ends up on an upbeat note.
It ends on an upbeat note, a crescendo. So it goes to show that the original Rebbe says that there's a parallel between Tisha BAv and Simchas Torah. Namely, you have 9 days of sorrow, of mourning, in the 9 days, Tisha BAv, and you have 9 days of joy, beginning with Sukkot, and the 9th day being Simchas Torah. And
that's in Golos, but that's not in Eretz Yisrael, though. That's not in Israel, only in Golos.
In Golos, that's true. But, you know, it's interesting. Chassam Sofer writes, you know, Mashiach comes, they'll have a extra day Yom Tov in Eretz Yisrael also, but that's for a different occasion.
By the way, I saw brought down that there'll be 9 days of Hanukkah when Mashiach comes to far-flung communities too. So Minchas Chinuch writes that, yes.
Okay, nice. So these two sets of time parallel each other. In fact, Tisha BAv is the day of Yirmiyah Hanavi. Yirmiyah was born on Tisha BAv. He cursed the day of his birth. Simchas Torah is the day of Shlomo HaMelech. We talk about on Shmini Atzeres, we read about how Shlomo blessed the people. Kabbalistically, Yirmiyah was the Gilgal of Shlomo HaMelech, so that's also another parallel.
Reincarnation.
What I happened to see, reincarnation, I saw last night, very late last night, that Tisha BAv is the yard site of the Chayza of Lublin, one of the great Hasidic masters. And in the last year of his life, they couldn't find him on Simchas Torah. And they were looking for him. Where did the Rebbe go? And apparently, he had fallen out the window, but not just fallen out the window, the entire window caved in. And upon further study, they discovered that he was involved in some kind of divine communion. He was trying to pressure the Almighty to bring the redemption, and he sort of pressed too hard. You know, he overstepped his boundary, and the dark side tried to take him away, and he got injured, but he ended up passing away that year on Tisha BAv, which also is brought that shows a correlation between Simchas Torah and Tisha BAv. This injury occurred on Simchas Torah, and he passed away on Tisha BAv. So we have this two parallel times of the year. In fact, I mean, this is an amazing discovery. If you look in the Sefer Torah and Parshas Pinchas, that talks about all the Yamim Tovim, all the holidays. So it talks about Rosh Hashanah, it talks about Pesach, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Now, in between each holiday, there's what we call a Parsha Sesuma, or a Samach in the Chumash. And in the Sefer Torah, what this means is the previous subject ends in the middle of the line, and the new subject begins on that very line. So in other words, all there is a space it could be as little as 4 letters of empty space, but the previous subject ends on the line and the new subject begins on that very line. So in between Pesach and Shavuos, it's what we call Parsha Sesuma. It ends and begins on the same line. It's closed. It's closed between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's closed between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. It's closed, but in between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah, it's open, which means Shavuos ends in the middle of the line, and Rosh Hashanah does not begin until the very next line. So why is it open? What is this gap between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah? Are we trying to fill something in? So the Rizhiner Rebbe observes that yes, indeed, there is a holiday that will be inserted between Shavuos and Rosh Hashanah, namely Tisha BAv. So there's this gap in the Sefer Torah. It's awaiting. So what this means is that even though Eicha is read as a mournful dirge now, but like we see on Simchas Torah, it just takes a little bit of a happy ending to transform the whole tune. So I came across, I was actually a friend of mine from France, Rafal Ansel. He gave me a commentary on Eicha from the Ben Ish Chai, and he interprets how Eicha will be read when Mashiach comes, that it will be transformed into a happy Megillah. I'll give you just some quick examples. Literally we say, Eicha Yashva Vadad, alas, the city dwells in solitude. That sounds very mournful. But Ben Ish Chai interprets that, it's actually it's speaking about the bounty of Jerusalem. Almost every city in the world, no matter how prosperous it is, relies on imports for some type of resource. Yerushalayim will be so bountiful and full of blessing that it will be in solitude, meaning completely independent. That's how the Megillah will be read. My favorite interpretation is in Pasuk Vav. We say Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Really, the way it's supposed to be, all Torah is supposed to emanate from Yerushalayim. Unfortunately, in the Golos, you have yeshivas all over the world, and not all Torah in the world comes from Yerushalayim. But the day will come, so we read in the 6th pasuk, Vayetzei mibas kol hadara. Literally, all the glory left Sion. It's empty of its glory, but it could be interpreted, Vayetzei mibas kol hadara. When Mashiach comes, all the glory of Torah will now only emanate from Sion. It won't have to come from New York or New Jersey. So
it's putting a positive spin on what could be what we now reading as negative.
Right.
So in other words, we're going to change the tune of Eicha.
I guess the tune will be
we can't wait for that. And of course, but on the very essence of Tisha BAv, well, it's the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, also has the seeds of the greatest joy. Mashiach was born or is born on Tisha BAv.
Yeah.
The Medrash says Menachem is his name, right? That's one of the names that they ascribed to him.
Yeah.
So where's Mashiach? If he's born already, where is he? Where's he hiding?
Well, actually, I just came back from Amsterdam. I was in Amsterdam. So there was, of course, Amsterdam was a hotbed of Sabbatian activity in the times of the Shabtai Tzvi. And one thing that Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas was one of the main opponents of Shabtai Tzvi. He said Mashiach has to be born in Israel. So he disqualified the Shabtai Tzvi on that account.
I think they say that according to the Medrash is that there was an Arab merchant there was a Jew outside of Israel. He was out in the diaspora, and he had 2 cows together, working together. And he said, "Where you're from?" He says, "I'm from Israel." He says, "You're stop. You unhook the animals because the base Midrash was destroyed." Then they're chatting, and he says, "Okay, you can hook them up again and work together because Mashiach was born."
Right.
So according to that Medrash, what happened was he sold all his merchandise. He went to Israel. He went to Beis Lechem. He found the woman where she had the child that was Mashiach, and he gave her food, stuff on credit. When he came back there, she said, "My son's unlucky because he was taken away. The wind blew him." And according to the Medrash, he was taken to Gan Eden, waiting to be brought back from Gan Eden. That's the Medrash. Whatever you want to ascribe to that particular Medrash, but it is an interesting question. Mashiach was born on this day. Where is he? And according to at least this interpretation, he's waiting in the Garden of Eden for us.
Right. Right.
We're speaking with Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. He is the Rav and founder of Machon Maggid HaRakia in Cedarhurst, New York. His book, he has quite a few books on Jewish holidays. This one we're looking at is called The Darkness and the Dawn, looking at Tisha BAv. You know, Rabbi Glatstein, there was a movement. In Israel, they have a Yom HaShoah, a day of commemorating the Holocaust. But there was some thought, and I think Rav Soloveitchik was of the opinion that the day of Holocaust memorial should be moved to Tisha BAv. All the tragedies are embedded in Tisha BAv, and therefore it should be commemorated on Tisha BAv itself. It didn't happen, but there was such a thought. I was curious to get your perspective.
Yeah, well, that's an important hashkafa. That was the opinion of the Brisker Rav as well as Rav Moshe Feinstein, not to commemorate the Holocaust independently of Tisha BAv, because all Jewish tragedy could be traced back to the destruction of the temple. In fact, Rav Moshe addresses a very fascinating question. He says, well, why then, if you look in the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, the 20th day of Sivan was reserved for commemorating the Chmielnicki pogroms. So it was it was asked to Rav Moshe. So we see that there are tragedies that are more independent of Tisha BAv. So Rav Moshe said you can't compare Chmielnicki pogroms to Holocaust. He said a fascinating distinction. He said the Chmielnicki pogroms, Rav Moshe says any disaster or any persecution that is perpetrated by the reigning government is a result of Churban Beis HaMikdash. Anytime there's persecution from the power, the reigning power, that's a result of the destruction of the temple. But Chmielnicki pogroms were anti-establishment, anti-government pogroms. It was rebellion. So that's not a result of the Churban. Churban is only the Romans destroyed the temple. They, so to speak, usurped the Jewish supremacy. So any evil perpetrated by the Roman government or whatever the reigning government is, that could be traced back to Churban. But Moshe says anything that's anti-government or rebellion, that's independent of Churban.
Interesting, because the Crusades are also commemorated on Tisha BAv by some of the keynotes.
So, right, that's interesting because the Crusades were in a way also anti-government.
Well, no, I think weren't they government sponsored?
So it's somewhat of a question because when the Crusaders finished attacking the Jews, often they attacked the governors or the government. You had these knights. I mean, this is a separate subject. You had these knights roaming Europe, and they were just pillaging and violating, and so the government sort of allowed them to take out the wrath on the Jews. But often, after they finished with the Jews, they pillaged the governor's palaces and homes, and so that's why they sent them off to Jerusalem. So, I mean, there's what to discuss regarding that.
Right, because the pogroms are, once they finish killing Jews, they end up stealing from other people too. It's once you unleash these dark forces, they just don't stop with the Jews.
Yeah,
unfortunately. But it's fascinating because Tisha BAv is a day we commemorate a lot. What about the Spanish Inquisition? There's no kinna for the Spanish Inquisition, which also, according to tradition, the Jews were expelled from Spain on Tisha BAv.
Yeah, so
1492.
I mean, this is a question that has been stirring my heart for many years. Here it is. We know that Fernand and Isabella, they scheduled for August 2nd, 1492. Abba Brenner says they didn't even realize it was Tisha BAv. It happens on Tisha BAv. We commemorate practically every other disaster, and this one is conspicuously absent. So in the past, and this is what I write in the book, the Abba Brenner ruled that when they were expelled from Spain, they were expelled amidst music. Even though it was Tisha BAv, he allowed them to play music on Tisha BAv. So one of the reasons he gave is because he didn't want the Jews to fall into despair. But another reason is because a Jew never cries when they leave the Gullus, because we never belonged in the Gullus in the first place. So I believe that one of the reasons we don't mourn the Spanish expulsion is because what are we crying about? That we left the golden Gullus of Spain. We didn't belong there. That's not our home. A Jew doesn't cry when they leave the Galus. A Jew cries when they're murdered. A Jew cries when they're persecuted. But leaving Galus, we never belonged there in the first place.
But a lot of Jews were killed during the Inquisition, which began on that day. So it's the beginning, not only Jews that left, but Jews who stayed ended up getting crucified.
Yeah, so actually,
and burnt at the stake.
So this is also an important historical point, and that is the expulsion was scheduled for August 2nd. The expulsion was of those Jews who were practicing Judaism openly. Until that day, Jews who professed to be observant had no problem in Spain. The issue was as follows. In 1391, there were 200,000 forced conversions in Spain. Any Jew who allowed himself to be converted for the 100 years before 1492 was now a new Christian. A new Christian that now they were under suspicion that maybe they were practicing Judaism in secret. So for those Jews, there was Inquisition. The Inquisition was they were inquiring as to whether they were observing Christianity in secret as well. But the Jews who openly observed Judaism had no problem in Spain. So the Inquisition had been going on for decades in Spain. But what Torquemada was afraid of was Torquemada, the Grand Inquisitor, he tells Ferdinand, so long as Jews are openly practicing Judaism in Spain, they're going to be encouraging the new Christians, and maybe they're being observing Judaism in secret. So the truth is, expulsion was scheduled for Tisha BAv, but the Inquisition had been going on for decades. And this year I've come to realize that to commemorate the expulsion of 1492 is really missing the much greater tragedy of 100 years of torture, of being burnt alive, of really barbaric treatment of the conversos, of the Marranos. I mean, that was the far greater tragedy than the fact that Jews who openly observed Judaism were thrown out in 1492. The real tragedy, Zev, is that hundreds of thousands of Jews converted. Now, we don't like to talk about that. And I think the reason why we don't talk about the Inquisition on Tisha BAv is because it's downright embarrassing for us. This was really the only time in our history that large segments of the community defected from our religion. We never had it before. We've never had it since. There were individuals throughout history, but in Spain, hundreds of thousands of Jews left the fold. And I think, like the Gemara says, that there's certain episodes in the Chumash we don't read the Targum of because of the honor of the Jewish people. The era of Spanish Jewry is really a source of great embarrassment. And, I'm just going to, say it straight. It wasn't only regular, it affected all strata of Jews, from Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshiva, Mayalim. There were great people who left the fold as well. There was a Rabbi Solomon Levi. There were other Rabbanim. And it's an era in Jewish history that's probably the darkest days for Jewish people were the Spanish era. And I found in the writings of the Ravid that this was worse than Churban Beis HaMikdash. This is a tragedy. We don't mourn on Tisha BAv. It's worse than the tragedy of the Churban. To have such wholesale defection, we never had before and we never had since.
Well, actually, we had something similar according to the Medrash in Egypt. Yeah. 4/5 of Jews died during the darkness plague. True. Only 1/5 left. We're talking about millions of Jews that didn't want to become Jewish or stay Jewish or leave to get Eretz Yisrael.
Right. Look, in Egypt, you had people, maybe their faith was not complete, but to abandon the religion and to convert, that's, you're not going to read about this in the...
Right. The question with the Marranos is it wasn't a full conversion, is that they still practice Judaism in secret. So it wasn't as if they just say, hey, I love Christianity, I'm becoming a Christian. It was under coercion, and they still maintained Jewish ties. That's why we had so many Marranos. You have so much Jewish blood. You came back from Spain.
Absolutely.
A lot of people in Spain have Jewish blood.
Yeah,
Jewish heritage.
According to secular historians, as much as 80% of Spaniards have Jewish blood. But not all Jews were practicing Judaism in secret. Yes, surely many were, but the reality of what was happening was probably from the darkest times in our history.
No, certainly was. And the Marranos were a lot of them, but I'm sure a lot of people converted, Jews converted, and stayed converted over the course of time. Our guest is Rabbi, founder of the Mechon Maggid Harakia in Cedarhurst, Rabbi Daniel Glatstein. His book that we're exploring is The Darkness and the Dawn relating to Tisha BAv. You tell a story about Chief Rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Herzog. Share that with our audience.
Are you referring to when he visited the Pope?
About Rabbi Beryl Wine, and it was
Oh,
a little
that's
boy.
one of my favorite stories. My grandfather actually met Rabbi Herzog in the DP camps. Rabbi Herzog had with him a list of the names of 10,000 boys and girls who were given to Christian institutions, monasteries, and so forth during the war. And he had audience with Pope Pius, and he said, "Here, I have a list of all the boys and girls. I have the names. Give us back our children. Right now, you're kidnapping them." And the Pope slams the door in his face. He says, "Look, all these Jews have been baptized. Once a Jew is baptized, we can never return him. And, nothing, thanks, but no thanks." So Rabbi Wine tells a story that Rabbi Herzog visited his community in Chicago after the war. And he's telling this story to the audience. And he turns to the young men and he says, he breaks down crying. And after weeping copiously, he lifts up his head and he says, "There's nothing I could do for these 10,000 boys and girls. But what are you going to do? What are you young men going to do for the future of the Jewish people?" That was the challenge that Rabbi Herzog posed to those young men. And Rabbi Wine says this is a challenge that always reverberates in his ears. And really, this is what we have to think about on Tisha BAv, because, while we have 3 weeks, we have 9 days, we have the week that Tisha BAv comes out in, and here it is, Tisha BAv itself, and after a few hours in the morning, we get off the floor, we get up already, like we're done, we're finished, we're done with this. We don't even give it a full day. What's this custom in the middle of the day? We just get up and we're done. So I think the idea is that a Jew doesn't allow himself the luxury to wallow in self-pity and just sit on the floor and say, "Woe to me." We got to pull ourselves off the floor, roll up our sleeves, and say, what are we going to do for the future of the Jewish people? So on Tisha BAv itself, we don't even give it the full day. We're already off the floor, and we're plotting what we could do to help rebuild ourselves.
Well, a Jew is never supposed to give into despair.
Yeah.
So even the saddest day of the year has elements of hope. In fact, I think I may have mentioned last time we spoke, Rabbi Daniel Melman used to be with the Lido Beach Synagogue. He's in the 5 towns now. He said the word shachar, darkness, if you give it a little kvetch, it turns into chor, into morning, into light. So that's our goal, is that even the darkest moments have elements of light, and that we just got to pivot to the right direction, and it will be enlightened by it. And I think it's a powerful, powerful thought for Tisha BAv. No matter how bleak things are, things will get better. Well, the question though is it's unfortunate, and is that in Eretz Yisrael today we're finding such division, especially around Tisha BAv time. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, yes, there's division, but on the other hand, there's also truth, and look, this is an issue that if it would be relevant, if it would be any other country in the world, it would be instinctive that why should a democracy be controlled by any other member of the government? But when it comes to Israel, every country has a double standard with Israel, and that they fuel the fire. But Hashem should send peace to our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, and peace, shalom la'artzech v'shalom la'irech.
No, we need peace, and we need unity, but that's probably the fact. Listen, the first base of Mikdash, the first temple, was destroyed because we didn't follow the laws of the Torah. We didn't keep Shemitah, but God let us come back after 70 years. But the second temple, second base of Mikdash, destroyed because of sin and because of baseless hatred. We're still in exile 2,000 years later. So that's the root sin of why we're still in Gullus, why we're still in exile. And the question is, how do we, and I ask you this question, I know it's hard to answer, but as a leader in the community, how do we foster more unity among our people? Because that will bring the Mashiach. That's what turned away the Beis Hamikdash. Well, we'll bring it back is we're all together again. How do we do it?
Yeah, look, we've been trying to figure that out for 2,000 years. But even the Gemara that talks about the what we call sinas chinam and kamsa bar kamsa, there's a lot more there than just trivial and petty dispute. If you look in Josephus, we'll discover that bar kamsa was like a spy on behalf of the Tzedokim, and the strife and the quarreling here. It's not talking about. People couldn't get along because one was a little bit more observant, a little bit less observant. One was more black, while one was more white. This was a matter of hatred of the tzedaikim to the traditional Jews. So even though it's not popularized that way, the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa is popularized as, well, why can't we all our Jews get along? But in fact, even if you look in Josephus, the sinas chinam here that we're talking about was the hatred of the Tzedokim, those who denied the authority of the oral law of the observant Jews. And in a certain sense, history repeats itself. I don't know if now's the time to get into this analysis of Kamsa bar Kamsa.
No, well, let's close with that, because I think it's fascinating, because the opinion seems to be, at least how I've learned it, it had the situation been different, where he wouldn't have thrown him out, that would have averted a lot of tragedy.
Yeah, but there's more to the story. It seems like the issue was that the Tzedokim were not allowing traditional rabbinic Judaism to continue. And in a certain sense, that's what we see today. How do you foster unity? Well, we need true Torah leadership. True Torah leadership, where if our nation is a nation not through a geographical location, but through the Torah, like Rav Sadia Gaon teaches, that Ein Uma Senu Uma Ela B'Torah, then allegiance to Torah, true Judaism, is our most compelling unifying force. Again, easier said than done, but the unity that we need is not is more than just overlooking people's yarmulke color or clothing color. The unity that's required is unifying under the banner of Hashem and the Torah. So it's a matter of Jewish education. It's a matter of learning. It's a matter of teaching. It's a matter of understanding. And those who are steeped in the values of Torah, then sort of it's natural. People won't get caught up in what we call superficial trappings.
Remember Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, if I remember correctly, and some others that said the question was how could the irreligious, maybe they were anti-religious, secular Jews, the Zionists who build the country. So I think one of them said, talks about Yovel, the Jubilee year. First you return to your property, first you return to your property, then you return to the Mishpach, you return to religion. So there's something to be said about bringing people in, being makar of them, bringing them close, even though they were those secular Zionists of the early days were anti-religious. But yet there's a thought about bringing them in. And look at the kibbutzim today. Those that were the most rabid leftist kibbutzim became more observant as time went on. So things changed, and that's because of a positive attitude, a strong attitude. And even in Eretz Yisrael, when they had a recent demonstration, I believe in Bnei Brak, instead of throwing stones, they brought out shon to them, to the demonstrators. That created a whole different dimension as opposed to throwing stones, getting to a shouting match. So they're still our brothers and sisters, and whether they're religious or not, we have to reach out and set an example for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The approach of violent protest, we know, doesn't work, and doesn't produce desired results. But like we daven, we say Oisa Shalom B'Mroima V'Yasa Shalom Aleinu, that the Almighty He should engender the peace among our people, and we await that great day.
Amen, amen. What's your next book going to be?
The next book is about the Tana Rabbi Meir But Meir's opinion is that a Jew is always considered the child of Hashem, no matter what they do. So I have that sefer in Lashon Kodesh. Now I'm working on it in English for ArtScroll. So
very nice. Which brings to the unity theme. Even the worst Jew is full of mitzvahs, like a pomegranate, right?
Like a pomegranate, yeah, that's right.
So we have to always be down the kopzachos. Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein, we appreciate you being with us. I'm looking forward to your next book, and I recommend From the Darkness and the Dawn, Sefer Maggid HaRakia on Tisha BAv and related days. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have an easy fast. Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hello?